Hi, this is Cora Stack again. I just wanted to maybe talk about the previous video because it was really kind of developing and honouring the work of Jeremy Grantham. So, he's, I just felt perhaps I didn't, it was a bit on the light side. So let me try and go into a bit more depth, which I'm well able to do. It's just um, just to give credit to the people that influenced the video, which were the work of Fricker, who's a brilliant philosopher, and tying it into the insights of Jeremy Grantham. So I was blown away by his interview with Bloomberg, and it was incredibly insightful. So I don't know how much his insights have gone into the literature, but I'm bringing it in here, and I'm combining the kind of concepts of injustice developed by Fricker and with Jerry Grantham. So that's perhaps the uniqueness about the work here, because both of them are very interesting, have very interesting insights, and it's trying to look at them in sort of together in some sense and how they can help us understand things a little bit better. So Ireland's housing crisis is not a market failure, and we're saying it's a breach of the social contract. Now, I'm not a socialist, or certainly not a champagne socialist. I'm wearing a shirt from Penneys, and this is a boss thing for a long time. So I'm a mixture. So why working Irish people are being locked out, and why this is a moral, not personal failure. So people, this is the point. So I think we have to focus on moral failures here in order to get our point across, rather than other types of critiques. If you work full time in Ireland, if you did what you were told, got educated, stayed employed, paid your taxes, and you still cannot secure a stable home, then this video is for you. And there's how many people are in that trap. Because what you're experiencing is not bad luck, it's not poor personal choices, and it's not simply a housing shortage. What we are living through in Ireland is, in the words of the wonderful and brilliant Jeremy Grantham, it's a breach of the social contract. And that matters not just economically, but morally and also democratically. Let me begin with something very simple. For decades, this is now, echoing, the words or the ideas of Jeremy Grantham. For decades, there was an implicit agreement between the state and its citizens. He was saying this about the US. It was something like this: if you contribute to work compliance, taxation, and participation, the state will ensure a basic level of security. Not luxury, not wealth, but security. That included the realistic possibility of housing, a roof over your head, access to public services you had already paid for. I mean, we're all paying PRSI, and we're lucky to get a dental appointment, our teeth cleaned once a year. I mean, it's outrageous. And a future that did not require permanent anxiety. That agreement has been broken, and nowhere is this more visible than in Ireland's housing system. We're often told that Ireland's housing crisis is a result of supply constraints and planning delays or unfortunate global pressures, but that framing is too narrow. Because what is happening is not accidental. Housing in Ireland has been deliberately transformed. This from a social good into a financial asset. And when that happens, and it's about the balance, it's about the shift from one to the other, and the extent of that shift. It's gone too far from the social to the financial, and it's how do you switch it back? And when that happens, the logic changes completely. Homes are no longer built primarily for people to live in Ireland, and perhaps elsewhere, but particularly in Ireland. They are built to generate yield, to absorb global capital, and to deliver return to investors who may never set foot in the country. Here is the critical point. Housing is not a discretionary good. You can postpone buying a car, you can cancel a holiday, you cannot opt out of shelter. Economists call this inelastic demand. We studied this, the inelasticity of supply, and that was something I studied a long time ago. When the price of something you cannot avoid rises faster than wages, people do not merely feel pressure, they lose real freedom. In Ireland, rents and house prices have risen far beyond income growth. This is not inflation, it's extraction. And it's been driven by identified structural choices. Large-scale institutional investors, often international funds, have acquired vast amounts of Irish residential property. These homes have removed permanently from the these homes are removed permanently from the ownership pool. They're not starter homes, they're not family homes, they're financial instruments. For the people living in them, there's no pathway to ownership, only indefinite rent extraction. This is not a failure of individuals, it's a failure of public policy. Now I want to talk about something that rarely appears in housing debates: moral injury. Moral injury is something I'm very interested in at the moment. I have so many moral injuries. I don't know how I'm able to do all. So when I look at everything, moral injury occurs when institutions violate deeply held expectations of fairness. For people, working people in Ireland, this often sounds like I did everything right and it still wasn't enough. That experience produces shame, self-blame, exhaustion, and eventually withdrawal. People don't disengage because they don't care. They disengage because they feel betrayed. This is why the language we use matters. We keep describing the crisis in technocratic terms: market adjustment, capacity constraints, affordability pressures. But these words completely miss the harm. Because what is being damaged here is not just income, it's trust, it's dignity, it's the belief that participation is met with protection. This is just another layer that is even more corrosive. It's called epistemic injustice. So this concept, developed by philosopher Miranda Fricker, refers to being wronged in your capacity to be taken seriously as a knower. In plain language, this means when people describe their lived experience of harm, they are told it's anecdotal, emotional, or uninformed, gaslighted in other words. They are not being just being disagreed with, they are being silenced. In Ireland, people living through this housing precarity are routinely told that systems are working, solutions are coming, they simply have to wait. But when your experience cannot be named in public language, you cannot contest it democratically. This is how democratic legitimacy erodes, quietly and then suddenly. We see the consequences of this in political behaviour. One of the most misunderstood phenomena in recent Irish and international elections is the rise in deliberately spoiled votes. As we saw this in Ireland recently, there was a massive spoiled vote. But let's try and see what could be behind this. Spoiling a ballot is not apathy. It requires effort. Yes, it does. It is a refusal to endorse choices that no longer reflect lived reality. It's a moral signal. It's a way of saying, I'm here, but this no longer represents me. This should be understood as an early warning sign, not dismissed as disengagement. At this point, some people might say, well, this is just the way the world is now. It isn't. And we know that because other countries made different choices. Take Vienna. In Vienna, housing is treated as a social infrastructure. I mean, it's one of the most amazing cities in the world, not a speculative asset. I mean, are they going in there buying it up right, left and centre? No, they're not, because of the housing policy. Around 60% of residents, including middle-income earners, live in secure, high-quality, affordable housing. This did not require revolution. It required political will. And I always believe that if Ireland had followed the advice of Dr. Peter Baker and others, we would not be in this situation. That's one fellow where, his advice should have been taken. Just in the history, and people like others, David McWilliams and people like that, but particularly like that he was employed to advise the government, and then his advice was ignored. I mean, and he was independent. He didn't do what the government wanted. He did what was right for the people, and his very measured kind of trying to put the brakes on the speculative side of the housing market were ignored, and to the detriment of so many people. We owe that man so much credit, and perhaps his policy should be taken out of the shelf again. The lesson here is not that Ireland must copy another country wholesale. The lesson is that policy choices matter. Repair is possible, but repair requires honesty. It requires acknowledging that harm has been done, not to a marginal group. There's no point in saying it's marginal. This is to working people who upheld their side of the social contract. And that's thousands and thousands and thousands. So let me be very clear in closing. Ireland's housing crisis is not about individual failure. It is not about effort. It's not about aspiration. It is about a system that asked for contribution and withdrew protection. A system that breaks faith with its people cannot remain legitimate indefinitely, but a system willing to acknowledge harm, reverse damaging structures, and restore fairness can be repaired. This is not radical, it is responsible, and it is necessary. And that's the end. That's the end of, hopefully this is a better video in terms of highlighting issues with what the chronic situation with housing has done to to so many people in Ireland, hugely left them with acute anxiety, moral injury, an epistemic injustice, and that looking at and framing it in these ways may help policy makers to rethink housing policy going forward. I mean, we can't. There's a lot. Perhaps we can't change the past, but certainly, Dr. Baker's excellent policies maybe should be taken out again and amended and immediately introduced, so that brakes are put on the speculative side until the system stabilises and people have access to proper homes. I mean, it's more and more complex now, but these are major issues that need to be addressed, and we need to have homes for people rather than homes delivering yield for profiteers as the primary value of property.